entrepreneurs and what their objective is.
Okay. I actually like to do a little poll for the audience first. So who here has heard of Mass Challenge? Raise your hand. Okay, great. Find these people afterwards. So I'm Rachel. I'm the Director of Programming at Mass Challenge, and we are the most startup-friendly accelerator on the planet. We take 130 companies out of Boston every year, and we help them grow their company for 4 months, mentorship, curriculum, resources, and at the end, we give away $1 million non-dilutive prizes to 20 of the winners. And that's a little bit about Mass Challenge. We're actually growing globally right now. So we just launched in London, Switzerland, Israel, and Mexico City. And I'm really excited to be here with you and tell you a little bit more about Mass Challenge and learn a little bit more about accelerators and sort of what might be the right fit for you out in the audience.
So I'm Nacho de Pinedo. Thank you for inviting me to Miami. It makes me feel really at home with so many people speaking Spanish. It's wonderful. So we have an accelerator called Impact, which means Internet Mobile Projects Accelerator. So we are an European accelerator funded by the European Union. So we this year we had 3,500 applicants to our accelerator from 30 countries in Europe, and we selected 60, and we are handling a 6 months acceleration program with them. And we're giving them 100,000 euros for free. So basically, we're getting probably the most interesting startups from all over Europe. We started as a digital business school. That's ISDI. And when we started that business school, we found out that 22% of our students were launching a startup within 1 year. And that made us think that maybe launching an accelerator could be a good idea, and basically that's what we are doing.
I think I'll follow suit. How many of you have heard of TwinLab, Women Innovating Now Lab? Great. I think Matt Hagman gave us a shout out before we got up here. So it's great to be here. TwinLab is an industry agnostic accelerator program for early stage women founders. We launched TwinLab to solve what we saw as a very important problem in the accelerator ecosystem, which is that about only 15% of women represent accelerator participants here in the US. So we thought, we were inspired to design an accelerator that created an environment for women to think big, launch big, and really grow their businesses. So WIN is an 8-month program. We provide peer community, intensive mentorship, coaching, full-time access to co-working space, and just a very strong network of women to join and work with. We're in our 3rd year in Boston, and our great news is that, and much thanks to the Knight Foundation, we are launching in Miami, so our application window is currently open.
That's fantastic. Thanks, guys. For those in the audience, I think it's important for us to talk about the pros and cons of an accelerator. And I think it'd be good for us to walk through and talk about what an accelerator is supposed to accomplish for the entrepreneur, and why it may be a good fit and why it may not be a good fit. And so why don't we start with you, okay. Rachel.
I think any accelerator, any program you're really participating in, whether it's grad school, an accelerator, it's thinking about what's the end game. Is it mentorship? Is it, do you want to have money at the end of the program, like a Techstars? Do you want equity taken from your company? So really being mindful of what the key takeaways are and dedicating the resources. Mass Challenge is a non-residential program. We of course have co-working space, but it's non-required. That being said, the startups that are there day in and day out and bumping into executives from Microsoft and IBM, et cetera, are likely getting more out of the program. So I would say really dedicating the resources and the time to say this is the right accelerator for me. These are the 3 things I want to get out of it. And I want to build my network. I think a lot of it is really the access. Mass Challenge was started as a way to really reduce the friction between why should a startup that's growing not have that meeting with that executive? How can we make that happen as quickly as possible? So kind of what Heather Jean said about scaling and launching as quickly as possible. So I think thinking about who do I want to meet with, how do I get access to those people as quickly as possible is something you should be mindful of when you're thinking about if an accelerator and which accelerator is right for you.
And I think you bring up a really good point, because I think the relationship idea for a startup at the very beginning will one gets a lot of the roadblocks out of the way quickly, right? You know, going out on your own and doing this all by yourself, I think you run into a tremendous amount of roadblocks. You know, I'm not sure if you guys have any other thoughts, but I think relationships is one that jumps out really quickly about the benefits. And then you also mentioned a little bit about the cons. I think you do have, there is a price to some of these things, right? Whether you're using that space or you're using whether you're giving up the equity. But sometimes the overall, the pros heavily outweigh the cons. I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts.
Yeah, well, for me, I think there is an accelerator fit for any startup, but I don't think there is one single way of accelerating. So for us, what we are trying to do is help startups to go to the next level without asphyxiating them, because there are many accelerators that are basically, what they want is to pamper the startups, and they want to get them very close to them, and they think that maybe introducing them a lot of interesting people who are interesting for the accelerator, but maybe not for the startup, it's wonderful, and who are all the time on top of them. That's okay for some kind of startups, but I don't think that's good for others. In our case, we have a delocalized accelerator. We are handling entrepreneurs from almost 20 countries in Europe, so we don't have time to pamper them. So basically what we are doing is we push them and we put them very hard milestones, because our objective is basically to move them to the next level as fast as possible. So the mentors we are choosing for them are mentors who are fit for each kind of a startup. For instance, if we are taking a hotel startup, we will probably bring a CEO of Airbnb, or if we are taking one startup which is focused on travel, we will bring someone from Booking. And these guys, the first thing they do is they build milestones for those startups, and the startups have to get to those milestones in these periods, because if they don't get it, we don't give them the money. We are giving them the money bit by bit, and we give the full of the money just if they fulfill the milestones. And if they do it extremely well, then we will give them more money. So basically, that's one part of the things we are doing. There's another, I think there's another purpose of an accelerator, which is to tell startups that maybe they have to close. Okay, that's something which is very difficult to tell to a startup, because everybody thinks the idea is the best idea and they can execute it. But I think that one of the missions of all accelerator is to tell the truth. And sometimes it's better to tell that a startup, listen guys, it's better that you close this one and start another thing, because you're losing your time and our money, okay?
Yeah, just to build on that, I think one of the very important forces that accelerators bring into the ecosystem is that they follow the fail fast, rapid prototyping approach. You know, I think accelerators have sort of proven that we can throw out the business plan and sort of the old school business incubation model. But I also feel like what they do is they bring the entrepreneurial ecosystem to you, right? So as an entrepreneur, you have to spend a lot of time building social capital, networking with investors, attracting talent to your team. And accelerators are really designed to do that for you in a short period of time. And so I think there are ways that you can really take advantage of that. Of course, oftentimes the cons are in an exchange. You have to commit to the deliverables. We have a milestone-driven pathway and win as well, so we expect our entrepreneurs to meet monthly goals. And at times, there's exchange of equity. I don't think any of us run on an equity model. So win is free to participants. So, and then lastly, I'll just say, and I actually think this is one of the biggest values of the TwinLab, is it brings you community, right? So I'm sure all of you in the audience that have launched a business know that it's an incredibly lonely experience, and being able to wake up every morning and join a community of entrepreneurs that are just as much in the hustle as you are, I think can be an incredibly make or break powerful experience.
Those are great points. Nacho, maybe you could speak a little bit. I think you have a unique perspective having the international accelerator experience. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the differences between what you see on an international front versus what we may see on more of a domestic front.
Okay. Well, as I told you, we are now managing 60 startups from almost 20 countries in the European Union. There are some countries I didn't know they exist. until the startup came. So that's very difficult. They speak different languages, not only Spanish, which you know is the most important language in the world.
Claro.
Hey, I'm from Open English, so I'm pushing for another language.
We have to speak a common language there, and unfortunately, it's English. That's the language we use in our startup.
I'm also selling licenses to my platform.
So it's good for him as well. So basically, everything we do it in English, because that's sort of common language in Europe. Our startup is a delocalized accelerator, which means that we are not bringing the startups to our working space, because on the first step, we take only startups that are already up and running or with a very developed prototype on field. So they don't have the need of being pampered by us in our space. We bring them at least 3 times during the acceleration process. The first, we bring them 2 weeks, because we do an education accelerating program first, because we have perceived that most accelerators are using mentors and they are not using education. So mentors spend more of their time educating entrepreneurs in things that are really basic. So we take these things aside and we put an acceleration education program for them, okay? Then we bring them for some milestone meetings, and at the end we bring them for what we call the deceleration event, which is basically one weekend when we all share all the experience, so we get a lot of cross-fertilization. So that's the difficulty of working in Europe. There are very small countries, a lot of people, a lot of languages, so you have to work delocalized.
And Rachel, maybe you can talk a little bit as well. I know Mass Challenge has kind of expanded beyond, and they have a pretty aggressive growth strategy. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the differences that you see in the regions that you're, where Mass Challenge is there.
Yeah. I would say when we think about launching into a new market, it's really, we actually do a whole innovative ecosystem mapping, thinking about talent, university talent, partnerships, sponsorship. So how can we actually be not just open for a summer or a program, how can we be sustainable for 2 to 3 years at the very minimum? And so that's a little bit of sort of how we think about growth internationally and even domestically as well. And I would say, in addition to that, it's also thinking about what are the long-term revenue sources for the entrepreneurs? So for example, we just launched Mexico City, and so we have a lot of people who are actually out in Texas and here in Miami, and who are thinking, I want to grow my business both in the US and in Mexico City. Mm-hmm. So with our global partnership, we can actually help them in both locations. So that's something that we're thinking about as we expand globally. How do we not only leverage our own network, but of course put the startups at the center of it?
That's great. And Heather, Jean, maybe you can talk a little bit too. I know you guys just selected Miami for your next location. It'd be great to understand a little bit about why you selected Miami, or how do you make those decisions to go and select that next location, what you guys are going to go launch?
Yeah, so obviously our mission is to accelerate women entrepreneurs, and Miami has been such a fantastic opportunity to be here. Many of you probably know that Miami is actually one of the top metro areas in terms of number of women-owned businesses, but the data also shows that the businesses aren't quite scaling up. And so that's the perfect intersection for us to come in and really create infrastructure for high growth for women-owned firms. And in addition to that, we're just very inspired by, I think Miami is really leading the way in terms of the intersection of diversity and innovation. And so it's a great opportunity for us to be here and really at the forefront of that in terms of gender. So.
It's fantastic. And could you remind us too what your opening period is right now? You said you're still taking candidates.
Yes. So our applications will run through May 2nd. We actually have a booth here, so if you're interested in talking to some current winners, is what we call our participants, we encourage you. We just hired our new director, Nellie Farah, who's also here as well. So we'd love to chat with you more about application requirements. We're looking for women founders that are beta testing or in prototype phase, but we're also interested in talking to you if you're at the idea stage or looking to enter into the growth phase.
That's fantastic. let's move on to another question. So, I think it's a little daunting. There's a lot of accelerators that are out there today, right? As an entrepreneur, what should the entrepreneur be looking for in an accelerator? And, how do they know that they're picking the right accelerator for their needs? Because it'd be good to talk a little bit about fit, because one size doesn't always fit all, right? So maybe if you could talk about that a little bit, Rachel, that'd be helpful.
So Mass Challenge is any industry, any company, anywhere in the world. Less than $1 million in revenue is sort of one of our guiding benchmarks for getting in, or for applying, I should say. It's also a very competitive process as well. We had about 1,600 applications for Boston for the 128 spots. So just to sort of give you a sense of the volume. I think I've visited a lot of other accelerators, and in Boston there's EdTech accelerators, there's MedTech. Earlier today, I was sort of speaking with one of the entrepreneurs that's here, and he said, I don't know if I'm kind of a healthcare or I'm kind of a high tech. I think when you're thinking about what you ultimately want your business to be and who you want your customers to be or become, I think some people really like the wide variety of, let me connect with a ed tech company or a high tech company, and some people really just want to focus on ed tech. So I think my key message here is really thinking about what is the focus and the core business that you want to focus on as it relates to your industry, as it relates to the network that you want to create and the communities you want to build, especially as you scale.
Well, in our case, the fit is very clear in the application form. We're looking for European startups which are working in the internet mobile space, and that means basically everything. And we are taking only startups with are already on the market or with a very developed prototype. They shouldn't be with a volume higher than 3 million euros turnover, and they have to be less than 5 years old.
We always give the advice to think about, as you're choosing an accelerator, think about as if you were choosing an investor, right? So you want to really look at the program in a way, is it someone that you want to build your business with? I think it's worth doing due diligence about who is the mentor pool, what are you asked for in terms of commitment and time. At TwinLab, we require your presence 3 hours a week at our intensive sessions, and then you're committed to meet with your mentor twice a month. And we do have some requirements that take some commitment. So you really want to understand what those are. And then of course what the accelerator is asking for in exchange, whether it's an equity model or not. So I think it's worth doing your due diligence. And I just say I think timing is everything. So I think accelerators really serve entrepreneurs that are ready to fully commit to their business and launch or grow it in the market. So really think about that as well.
That's great. I think you hit on a very good point. You should look at it just like an investor, right? You should do just as much due diligence with this relationship, especially if you're going to pour so much time and energy into it. We have a little bit more time. I would love to hear a success story, maybe from each one from you guys. It doesn't necessarily have to be a company that we all know, but it'd be good to relate to something that you guys relate to, right? The one that sticks in your head. And maybe you could talk a little bit about why you think of that as such a successful startup that kind of went through your accelerator.
I actually want to jump back to the last question really quickly, because I want to say something that I heard at a panel about a similar topic, which is if you can, go physically visit the accelerator, be in the space, feel what it feels like, just like you would meet an investor. I think that was really good advice that I heard, like feel the fit and feel like if it feels like the right space for you. So I just wanted to jump back.
And it's a good point too, because you'll know it, like your gut tells you a lot, so it's a great advice.
Well, there are a lot of stories. Maybe I will start with the stories that seems smaller. Okay, we have some guy from our accelerator that basically couldn't do it. His business basically bankrupted at the end, so he realized that this was not his kind of business. But he found a job here in the States. In fact, I think here in Miami at the beginning, and then he jumped to San Francisco. And the point was that he realized that he was happier working for the startup of someone else than from his own startup. I think that's great as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. On the other hand, we have some other startups. For instance, one which is called 8 Feet, which is now here in the States. He is now getting, I think, a third round. We got one from Turkey that was acquired by a Microsoft vendor. We got one in Spain that is getting his, I think, again, third round, and they have struck a deal with Twitter because they are doing, it's called notegraphy, and it's making your tweets really nice because they are creating a language, a visual graphic language through the tweets, so they are getting a lot of traction. So there are a lot of stories. Their success stories shouldn't be stories about how much money did that guy got, or how big his company is now. It's more about personal impact and what they do. One of the things we are measuring is the employment we are creating. We are measuring that. I think that's very important, and especially in Europe. So for us, this is success. When you are growing and you are employing people, that's okay. Okay, you can go to bed and say, I can sleep well.
That's good.
I'll give a shout out to our 2 winning entrepreneurs that we have at our booth for the conference. Estefania Cotes, she launched her business in Bogota. She's a real visionary. Her business is about selling electric bicycles and helping solve the pollution problem, and she's planning to expand in Latin America and the US, so you should drop by and say hi to her. As well as Erin, who is an alum from last year's program. Her business is Entrada. She's working with hotels to train their employees on the job how to speak English. So, you know, I think both businesses have a social mission sort of overlay, and yet they're building really strong revenue models. And I would say I really feel like Win has been a force to just interject in people's lives to really help them go big for the business. So both Erin and Estefania are graduating with their MBAs and could easily go on to work in the corporate sector, but instead they're choosing to pursue their dreams. And I think Win is just a great force for that. So if there are any of you in the audience that have been at that point where you really want to go for your business and you feel like you need a support network to do that, you should think about applying to WinLab.
Excellent.
There are so many stories, you're right, and all of our T-shirts and all of our branding says impact over equity. That's really what we're all about, and I think we're all talking about impact. And if you ever apply to Mass Challenge or think about it, the entire application is about impact. How do you define impact? Is it transportation? Is it healthcare? Is it saving lives? Is it saving time? There's so many different ways to define impact, and there are so many stories. I think one of my favorite stories is one of our companies that came out. It was an idea in a college dorm room, sort of like Mark Zuckerberg-ish, and it was an app that you basically could upload a rash that you have to help you diagnose skin cancer. And now it's really taken off. Dermatologists are using it. They're employing about 100 people in Boston. So it's really not only creating impact and saving lives, but it's also creating jobs. It's a female founder. It started by somebody who sort of just had an idea. So there's a lot of kind of little nuances, I think, within that story that actually trickled to the 835 alumni that have gone through Mass Challenge.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love hearing about impact too, because I think we talked about this backstage, that there's a lot more that goes into as you build a business and you build a startup, what you actually get out of it. And, you know, like a lot of it, sometimes it's failure, a lot of it's impact, a lot of it's, you know, building a business, and success can be seen a lot of different ways. You know, we have a couple more minutes. I would love to hear from you guys about the future of where accelerators are going. And so maybe you could each paint a little bit of a picture for the audience about what your respective companies will look like in the next 5 years. And what are you trying to accomplish long term?
Okay. I'll speak both for the Boston team, because I'm on the Boston team, or even just for Mass Challenge globally. So one of our missions is, one of our core pillars is really thinking about kind of, we said cutting the red tape, if you will, for entrepreneurs. We actually want to have every company that applies to Mass Challenge have a scholarship, a living stipend scholarship, whether it's focused on gender, focused on your industry, but really, again, I think Heather Jean said it, that people are deciding between if they should join a company or if they should start a business. And I think it was Steve Case who said earlier, startups are the ones that are job creation tools. So I'd say number one is scholarships for all of our startups. Number two is Mass Challenge, really the tools that we hopefully bring to all of the ecosystems everywhere. And we do have a very aggressive growth plan, but really thinking about not just arriving and what can we do, but what's here, how can we make it better or enhance it or bring people together, bring community, bring mentorship. And I think the last one is sort of talking about the inclusive entrepreneurship. And a lot of the speakers up here have talked about it, we've talked about it. How do we make sure that it's a balanced approach to accelerating everybody, no matter if they're from a rural background or they're a female, a person of color, whatever industry they're in, everybody has the opportunity to really grow their own business and become their own entrepreneur or join another team as well.
Okay, for me it's all about pain and ambition. Any startup should solve a pain and should have the ambition to solve that pain to a long extension of people. So that's basically what we are applying to ourselves. So now we are growing. We are as well launching in Mexico. We have ISDI in Mexico as well. And now we're doing a thing which I think is interesting. We are approaching corporates because I think there is a way of impulsing the startups using corporation as a final gate or final exit for them. And corporations are entering into this game, and they are putting money on and they are basically supporting a startup. So we try to close this circle, this virtuous circle between startups, accelerators, and corporations. I think we will help to solve pain and ambition.
Our goal is to be the #1 accelerator in the world for women. And I think our next chapter we're really passionate about getting women-founded companies funded. I'm sure many of you know the funding landscape is pretty disparate when it comes to women. 3% of venture capital goes to women-founded companies, so we're really passionate about closing that gap. And I think we just see ourselves as an ingredient in closing the gender gap, and in the future I hope that TwinLab will be merging with the other accelerators up here on the stage to include all founders, but in the meantime, we'll be hard at work and closing the gap.
That's fantastic. So thank you guys so much for participating today. I hope you guys learned a little bit. We will be outside if you have follow-up questions, but thank you guys very much.
Thank you.